Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast with Kevin Harrington and Seth Greene. Kevin Harrington is the inventor of the infomercial, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and has generated over $5 billion in TV and digital direct response sales. Seth Greene is the world's first trusted authority on cutting-edge direct response marketing, a best-selling author, and the only 3-time Marketer of the Year nominee. On the podcast, Kevin and Seth interview Sharkpreneurs who share straight talk on what it takes to explode your business.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com. Welcome to the podcast. This is your co-host, Seth Greene. Today, I've got the good fortune to be here with Josh Troy from Curvy & Blue. Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, Seth.
Our pleasure. So let's go back in time a little bit. How did you get started in the business?
Yeah, This is one of those questions that could always end up taking up the whole podcast, but I won't let it, obviously. I've been in sales my entire career. All I've ever done for, far over a decade now is just sales. And so my first business I started was a production company, a video production company. And what I love to share is that at that time, I didn't have any money for ads or marketing, right? Or at least I didn't think I did. I wasn't really super familiar with reinvestment and how all that worked. But what I did have was a lot of work ethic, and I was willing to do just about anything to get business. And so I started cold calling from day one. That was the beginning. And I didn't have any of the fancy tools or the expensive databases. Certainly not the AI stuff that we have today that we help clients with. So it was really just me and a bunch of willpower. So what I did was I would go on Google and I'd type in certain search queries and I'd go through and I would just call them as many times as I could. And I got really, really good at it. And so to make a really long story short, I built that whole business from outbound sales, and I started to realize that a lot of the people that needed video ads were clients of digital marketing agencies. So I started partnering with them, had conversations with them, and I was like, hey, I would really love to learn the inbound side of the business, and a lot of them wanted to learn the outbound side of the business, right? The outbound sales piece. And so I started consulting, building sales teams for digital marketing agencies, meanwhile learning direct response and digital marketing. One thing led to another. Long story short is I ended up creating a partnership where we had a couple other businesses. It was all sales floors. And I got to the point where I said, you know what? The thing that I love the most, there's 3 things for me, Seth. There's 3 things for me that are so important as a business owner. It has to check all 3 boxes. You got to love it. You got to be really good at it. And it's got to pay well, right? The third one's important. Otherwise, maybe do it as a hobby. And so that's sales for me. Sales and RevOps, it's all I've ever done. And so I said, what if I could create a business where that's all I did? It was just sales. And so long story short, that's how Curvy & Blue came along. And we are an outsourced, full stack RevOps and sales augmentation firm.
Awesome. Well, incredible story. Tell us a little bit about who's an ideal client for you now.
Yeah. Well, and it's difficult because, I think one of the things that you want to try to accomplish in business, this is something that I've definitely over the years as the company's grown, done my best to continue to expand our TAM. And so we have a very broad TAM, and we're agnostic. So there's not like a certain vertical that we work in, but what we look for is certain characteristics and criteria of a strong ICP. And so, first of all, the basic one is you got to be sales led. Right? We don't work with like an e-com business. We have to work with salespeople because it's a sales team related service. And so you have to have a sales team. We typically look for validation, right? We like to say that we're a scale team. If you look on our website, Curvy & Blue, we talk about how it's growth rate as a service, right? How do we really supercharge growth and hit, the growth rates year over year that they want? And so if you don't have product market fit, you don't have validation, it's probably a little bit premature. But validation can be seen in the market and from competitors as well. So the long story short, Seth, to answer that question is if it's a sales-led business, really good service or offering, typically they're over 100K a month in revenue. That's where that validation piece comes in. And then the economics is kind of the last thing that we consider. I mean, they usually have to be selling something 10 to 15K, over the phone or more. Now, that's even a slight caveat there because we have a client we sell a $500 product for, but it's like a call center and the earning potential is there, right? So I would say that if you are doing at least 100K a month or more and you have a sales team and run a grow fast, it's worth a conversation.
That makes a lot of sense. What are some of the biggest challenges that companies like that are facing that you're helping them solve?
Yeah, man, that's a big question. Well, I would first say that, something I love telling clients or prospective clients is that we're not immune to the problems of sales operations, right? On the other side of the contract, we inherit their problems. The only difference is we have a system for solving them, right? And we've done this a bunch of times. And so what I would say is first and foremost is most of them diagnose their problems incorrectly. They're not exactly sure in the sales operation like what's actually happening. Why aren't they growing faster? Why don't they have the conversions they want? It's all over the board. And so that's why, typically one of the first things that we would do in an engagement is, or going into an engagement is an audit. And by the way, actually, anyone listening to this, we have what's called our Curvion Revenue Engine X-ray. So it's a very deep audit where we can help them get clarity on like these are the problems that we're seeing. And then, the hopes is that leads into an engagement. But the cool thing is it adds a ton of value, whether they work with us or not. So that's the first thing, Seth, is like they don't really know exactly what it is. And then from there, it kind of splits into two things, systems led or people led in terms of the problem. So people led could be they have the wrong talent, right? They just, and that could be a lot of things. It could be they don't have the right experience for that role. There's, inadequate training, which could be almost quasi systems as well. Really poor sales management motion, where that's a really big thing that I see is they don't even know how to like develop the talent or manage salespeople correctly. And then there's the system side of the business. They don't have the right processes, playbooks. Their CRM is a mess. They don't have any standardized way of running a process, so they don't have like an institutionalized, professionalized sales process. And what happens there is it's called hero selling. They might have success with one rep or it's founder-led sales. They have trouble duplicating that process because they haven't really standardized, what that looks like at scale. And so the problems are all over the board, but it's typically either a systems issue or a people issue. And in our audit, we get really clear on what those things are.
That sounds like it would be a big help. What are a few numbers that founders should be looking at like every week to know whether their revenue engine is healthy?
Yeah, great question. And in fact, this really ties into what I was just saying, where I say, a lot of people they don't know exactly what's wrong with their sales operation. And so, as an example, and I talk about this in a lot of my content because it's so important. I mean, I will tell you, this happens to me all the time, but even just as recent as a couple weeks ago, one of our newest clients, they were convinced who their top sales rep is. They were absolutely convinced that that was the best sales rep. And when you look at it on the surface, it makes sense why they'd be led to believe that this person was generating the most amount of revenue in a month. So it's not crazy to think that that's probably the best sales rep. But when we started to look underneath that, we started to realize that the sales efficiency was actually the lowest on the team, which is kind of funny because it wasn't like second best, it was the worst. And this particular team had, I think, 6 reps. And so, well, how is that possible? How do you have the worst performance but the most revenue? Well, it was actually pretty simple. This person was just taking way more calls than anyone else. And so what that leads me to say is that in terms of metrics, most people they obsess over close rate or gross volume. How much volume is the sales rep selling, or what is the close rate of the sales team? But those things are so easily manipulated and very often misleading. The gross volume thing is what I just said. They could be taking 3 times as many calls. The close rate, let's say that you have multiple different products or services, you could really easily increase your close rate. Just sell the lowest sales price and put it on the longest payment plan if you're a company that offers payment plans. And so, but also it doesn't speak to, well, what about follow-up, right? What about pipeline management? So there's so many other factors. So I say all that to say this, Seth, we measure sales efficiency. And in a metric, that's called CDPBC. It's collected dollar per booked call. So we are measuring how much cash or revenue that sales rep generates for every call or opportunity assigned to them. And that takes all of that into consideration. And so when you look at that, what's so eye-opening and one of the quickest wins that we can make when we go in, because we've done this so many times, I'll actually say this quick note. Some of our clients, they're really large. And people would think, why would anybody want to bring in sales help if they're at that level of revenue? Like they'd trade places with them any day, right? But like we're talking about, revenue doesn't equal profit. Performance doesn't equal efficiency. And so sometimes we go in, like this example, we just change the lead routing, change the sales allocation model, and all of a sudden they're doing way more revenue and they're way more profitable because they're actually giving the best opportunities to the highest performing reps. And so that's the keystone metric that we really look at, and it's essentially return on rep.
That's awesome. I love the way you're thinking differently about that. This might seem obvious to you, but at what point should the founder stop being the primary salesperson? And, what kind of has to be in place before they can start hiring others to do the same thing?
Yeah, really good question. And one I deal with frequently. And I almost kind of take it back to what I started the podcast with, those three categories, right? You got to love it. You got to be really good at it. It's got to make money. Well, in sales, with most businesses, it's going to be the highest leveraged activity you could do. So we can check the money box. It is leverage. But the second two things is, do you love it? And are you great at it? If you are a founder that was never great at sales, then that's probably one of the fastest things you're going to want to replace because it's the highest leverage in the business. Sales is the lifeblood of the company. And if you're not very good at it, I mean, that's going to be the number one thing that you're going to want to build yourself out of. But if you're really good at it and you love it, sometimes founders hang on to that as long as they can, right? And it depends. Again, it goes back to that third point, though. What is the leverage? If you're selling six-figure, seven-figure contracts, you're probably going to hold on to that a lot more. And then it gets into other things like what's your actual company's goal? So are you trying to exit? Are you trying to sell? Because, most founder-led businesses, if it's a founder-led sales organization, they're going to have a really hard time selling or they're going to get whacked on the valuation. So all these other things come into play. But to answer the question of when should you start setting it up or preparing for that, from day one. And I think this is like one of the most important things. If you're a founder, you're listening to this, maybe even have a rep or two, but you're still on calls, you're still on phones, and you do a majority of the business. You want to document everything. It's all about transferable value. The greatest leverage you could have in sales is a training center with absolute gold. All the different ways to handle the objections, the stories that sell, the talk track, the call recordings, the wins, the losses, all of that type of stuff. So then you can very easily hand it off to that, whenever that time is right. I'll add one last thing, and I say this because I've seen it to be very valuable. When you are a founder selling, and you know that at some point you're going to hand that off to a sales team, what I really encourage a founder to do is to start to document a process or a talk track, a script that they actually follow so that the material in the training center is actually transferable. Because what I mean by that is a lot of founders, they don't have a formal, professionalized sales process. They're just kind of value bombing because typically they know the best about their business more than anybody else as well. What happens is that credibility, that authority, the way they sell, it doesn't transfer over to a sales team. So then you have a training center with a bunch of irrelevant material that people try to emulate and it crashes and burns. So I try to tell founders like, hey, when you know that you're about to start building out a sales team, try to document your process, get that all mapped out so you actually have training that's relevant. And that's, of course, all things we help with as well.
Awesome. You have helped so many businesses. What's your biggest challenge now?
Ooh, that's a good one. My biggest challenge recently, right? It changes all the time, which we feel really good about. We have a solution to is just really integrating more technology in the business. At our current level of scale, it's interesting because you go through a phase. Obviously, as you could hear, we're very process oriented. We're very systems dependent. Well, one of the things they don't tell you is when you start to grow a company with, reasonable size, we have triple, digit head count. We got a lot of sales reps and a good amount of people. what ends up happening is the more systems, the more training, the more processes, although that's great and that's what gets you to where you are, every time there's a change, it's kind of a big lift. Like we'll change something as an example in our CRM configuration SOP, which then needs to be changed in, the sales reps playbooks, that needs to be changed in the training center, that needs to be changed in the sales management playbook. Like it impacts so many other things. And so I got to a point where I'm like, wow, we have training and process for absolutely everything. But now it seems like if everything's important, nothing's important. And so we started building technology and, basic, easy stuff to really take you to the next level, like just being much more diligent in project management, the way that we orchestrate the playbooks and the connective tissue. So that's kind of the growing pains that we've had most recently, but it's exciting and we've been solving it.
Your passion is obvious. What do you like best about
Why
what
do
you're
so
doing?
many businesses struggle
Dude, I love
while
sales.
others seem to
I love
explode
sales,
overnight?
man.
Do you wish you had the secret
so it's
to this
funny,
type
and we don't need
of
to get deep into this. It
exponential
could be a
growth?
sidetrack. I'm
I've
sober.
scaled more than 20
I've been
businesses
sober for over
to over
13 years,
$100
February
million,
2013 is
and
my
it's not
sobriety
just
date.
luck.
So,
In my new
I got
book,
sober when I was
with Mark
20. I've
Tim,
never had a legal
Mentor
sip
to
of
Millions,
alcohol, actually,
you'll
so
learn the
that tells you a little bit
repeatable
about my
framework
passing
I use in
and
all my
how it
business
went. But,
ventures for
I
massive
remember when I got
success.
sober,
Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.
I don't know, man. I just love it. It gives you kind of a rush. Like there's nothing I'd rather do. And so for me, not only loving sales, but like I love the strategy of it. I think it's a perfect combination of strategy and, creative, right? You have like, I love crafting pitches and taking an organization that doesn't have a super dialed in sales operation. You tweak a couple knobs and, all of a sudden the velocity increases tremendously. So I love the entire process of making revenue. It's just, that's what stimulates me, man.
That is awesome. For our folks watching or listening who want to learn more, where is the best place for them to go?
Yeah, curvionblue.com. That's our website. You could check that out. It shows that, all about our services. We are doing a lot with AI. That's the most exciting thing right now, Seth, is like the things we could do with AI. I wish we had a decade ago. We now have the ability to listen to 100% of every call where previously would never make sense, but we could do that with call analysis insights and stuff. So lots of stuff on our website. And then a lot of people like just following me on Instagram, which is troy.joshua. I know you saw, Seth, I do have a new YouTube channel. It's not really new, but the frequency is low, and I'm starting to really kick that up here. I think people really enjoy the content over there as well. You could just type in Josh Troy, and hopefully we could add all those links somewhere below as well.
Yeah, we'll put them in the show notes. Josh Troy on the new YouTube channel, Curvion Blue, Curvion Blue, like the color. This has been Seth Greene for Sharkpreneur with Josh Troy from Curvion Blue. Josh, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for watching or listening. We'll talk to you or see you next time.
Why do so many businesses struggle while others seem to explode overnight? Do you wish you had the secret to this type of exponential growth? Now, I've scaled more than 20 businesses to over $100 million, and it's not just luck. In my new book with Mark Tim, Mentor to Millions, you'll learn the repeatable framework I use in all my business ventures for massive success. Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.